So I'll pick up where I left off. When I finished my previous post, I went to bed, ready to go to the local Starbucks the next morning to finish reading the diary. Surprisingly, I actually fell asleep. All the while, Natalie holding my hand and telling me everything was alright. I woke up at 3 a.m. again, feeling thirsty. By now, I've realized that this is not really normal, but then again, nothing has really been normal. I decided to go down to the kitchen and get a drink of water anyway. As I tried to slip out my hand from Natalie, she instantly woke up. "What's wrong, honey?" she inquired. Her eyes were not sleepy. It was as if she wasn't really sleeping at all. "Oh, nothing, love. I just need to get a drink of water," I replied. Before I even got out of bed, she was out of bed and ready to go down with me. She held my hand and walked me down to the kitchen as I got a glass of water. She was being overprotective, too protective. Mind you, there wasn't anything really wrong with her. She was herself, but I couldn't help but feel that she was making sure I never see the entity again. Which is why every chance she got, she tried to be around me. We went back to bed, and I fell asleep knowing that Natalie was probably not going to sleep at all. In the morning, she asked me several questions about why I was going to work. I made up some decent excuses. "Sweetheart, I'll be fine." "I thought you said it was over." "They're gone?" I told her. "Yes, of course. I just wanted to make sure. I just want to spend as much time with you as I can after all that's happened," she said with almost a sad look on her face. I arrived at the Starbucks, ordered some coffee, and without further delay pulled out the diary and began reading. Before I tell you about the contents of the diary, I want to make some observations regarding the diary itself. It was very old, leather-bound, almost falling apart. It had several different types of handwriting throughout, suggesting that it had been passed down and multiple people had taken notes in it. The notes within the diary were scattered, and I have tried my best to piece everything together. The diary began by telling the story of two sisters, who were both born a year apart. The first was Madeline, born on March 11th, 1800. A beautiful girl with bright green eyes. She was the first child to her parents. The second daughter was born on March 11th, 1801. This seemed a little odd to the parents, but they didn't give it much thought. Since their second daughter also had green eyes like her older sister Madeline, they named her Caroline. As they grew older, the parents realized that both Madeline and Caroline were identical. And not just identical twins, they looked exactly the same. It was only later that the parents realized not only were the daughters born on the same day, they were both born at exactly 3 a.m. Initially, they went and saw several different doctors, but none of them could explain this strange phenomenon. All they could conclude was that this was a strange anomaly. Eventually, the entire family just accepted the strange phenomenon and continued on with their lives. Of the two sisters, Caroline, the younger one, was very lively and energetic. She had a way with words, and all the townspeople were very fond of her. Madeline, the older sister, was quiet-natured. She didn't speak too much, and over the years had come to envy her sister Caroline. Caroline would sometimes pretend to be Madeline to confuse people. For the most part, the sisters were like any other siblings with usual conflict every now and then. Now this next part of their story takes a dark turn. It turns out that both Madeline and Caroline fell in love with the same man. Thomas was a very wealthy businessman, and they both got to know him because he worked closely with their father. Seemingly, Caroline admired Thomas's wealth more than anything, whereas Madeline was in love with Thomas. Thomas chose to marry Caroline, not knowing that her affection wasn't real. Being the quiet one, Madeline didn't say anything. On their wedding day, however, when Madeline saw Caroline, getting ready to put on her wedding dress, she couldn't contain her anger and frustration and confronted her little sister. In a heated argument, she accidentally pushed Caroline down the stairs, causing her to die. What happened next was even more bizarre. In a state of shock and emotional distress, Madeline hid her younger sister in the closet, put on Caroline's wedding dress, and proceeded with the ceremony. Madeline got married to the love of her life and proceeded to move forward with her life as if nothing had happened. A few days later, Caroline's body was discovered. The reason they knew it was Caroline is because the parents had secretly marked both sisters with 2 distinct burn marks on their backs. Once word got out, Thomas left Madeline in utter disgust. Madeline realized that her life was now ruined, realized what she had done, and hanged herself. Now I realized that Caroline was always the one who smiled, the one who talks, and the one who can imitate people. Madeline, on the other hand, is the twisted form of the entity. So at this point, I asked myself, so that's it? They're ghosts haunting the family? Well, not quite. The diary continued to explain what happened next. A generation later, the family was blessed with another beautiful baby girl named Laura. As Laura grew up, the rest of the family couldn't help but notice that she looked exactly like Madeline and Caroline. Slowly, the family started seeing the entity and strange things began to happen. Now, the writer in the diary claims that they do not completely understand the origin of the overlap. However, they do know that it happens when the child experienced immense emotion. Now, I won't give you each and every detail from the diary as the notes were quite extensive. The diary gave several accounts of different daughters being born in the family every once in a while that follow the same pattern. They look like Madeline and Caroline, and things around them become strange. Over the course of the notes, the diary writer's understanding of the entity increased. All cases ended with the sisters taking complete possession of the daughter or anomaly child and disappearing. Over the years, the family figured out that the original burn marks used by the parents to mark the 2 sisters could shield items from the sisters. However, this did not work when the marks were applied on people. The notes went back and forth on what exactly the sisters were, until I arrived to the last few pages of the diary, which were written by Natalie's great-grandmother. At least, that was my guess. Turns out she was a neurologist. She theorized that the sisters were a part of the anomaly child. This is why no one ever found a way to end the sisters. They reside within the mind of the anomaly child. This meant that part of Natalie was the 2 sisters. Natalie's great-grandmother continued by saying Natalie is not to blame. The sisters are able to communicate with her subconsciously. Therefore, she knows that they exist, but is not completely aware of what happens around her. To my horror, I turned to the next page hoping for a solution. The final words in the diary read, "It's her. They are a part of her. In every past case, the final stage was complete control of the anomaly child's body by the entity, after which the immediate people around the anomaly child would die, and the anomaly child would disappear. The sisters and entities that feed off of immense emotion. Unfortunately, we have tried, but killing the anomaly child does not end the cycle. They will be coming for me next, as they have seen the diary in my possession. I am hiding this diary under with the prescribed markings. To whoever finds this next, I'm sorry." Now, I wrote that last paragraph without telling you how shocked I was. Was this it? There was no solution? Is that why Natalie has been staying so close to me? Does she realize that she will eventually be lost to the sisters? How did she save me that day at the house? she actually interact with the entity? I closed the diary, my heart racing. I cannot lose Natalie. She is my world. She is everything to me. As I looked up, I realized it was almost dark. I spent nearly the whole day reading this diary. As I drove back home, I didn't know what to do. I did decide that I needed to confront Natalie and tell her about the diary, even though that probably didn't sound like the best idea. But what other choice did I have? When I got back home, Natalie rushed into my arms, and I apologized for being so late. We had a nice dinner together, and afterwards, she asked me if we could look at the stars for a little while. Considering all the weird things that had happened lately, I gladly agreed to finally doing something normal with Natalie. Remember how we used to climb out to the roof of the engineering building on campus and stare at the skies? She asked, turning towards me. Yeah, and I stand by what I said then. I don't really need to look at the stars when I can look into your beautiful love. I responded. I love you so much. Always know that, she said, and started crying. I held her as I couldn't help but think she knew what was going on. That night, I went to bed, fully intending to confront her the next morning. I woke up at 2:45 a.m. to Natalie quietly kissing my forehead. I pretended to stay asleep as I heard her walk downstairs. I quietly got up and followed her down. Then I saw her, holding a suitcase and walking towards the front door. Natalie? Honey, what's going on? I called out. She turned, eyes full of tears. I have to go. I'm so sorry. I have to go. Please. I wasn't letting her go. I had gone through too much for her sake. Natalie, I know everything. I started, but she kept glancing at the watch. Did you hear that fucking music? In the hall of the Mount King, get out of here. I started, but she kept staring at her watch. No, you don't. I asked them to. I told them to take me, but leave you alone, she screamed. Now I was really worried. Natalie, what did you do? How did you get me out of that house? Natalie, I need you to be honest with me. For once, honey, trust me. She collapsed on the floor. I begged them. I begged them to leave you alone and take me. I have been fighting them for so long. I have been fighting to keep them away for so long. Half the time, I don't even know who's in control. They agreed. They will leave you alone only if I stop fighting them. But it's too late now. I am no longer fighting them in my mind. I have given them control of my body. Run. 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 As she said her last words, I began to notice the strange inflections in her voice. Run! She screamed as she looked up, her eyes pitch black, her head starting to tilt, a grin slowly forming on her face. The clock behind her read 3 a.m. What ensued was probably the craziest thing I had ever done, but in hindsight, these last couple of months have made me a lot braver than I ever was. As she stood up, I rushed towards her and gave her a hug. I know you're in there, love. I know you have been protecting me all this time. You've always been my savior. Now it's time for me to save you. Now it's time I protect you. Come back to me, Natalie. Come back to me. You're stronger than they are. Fight back. Fight for me. Fight back for us. I love you. I can't live without you. I held her, eyes shut close. Remember the stars. Remember how we stared at them last night. Remember how we stared at them all those years ago. I still think your eyes shine brighter than any of the stars in the sky. In that adrenaline-filled moment, I kept talking on about our most cherished memories until I felt tears falling on my shoulder. I finally had the guts to pull away from her to see that she had returned to being my Natalie. Eyes shining bright green, full of tears. I'm so sorry, she said as I held her for a long time. After everything that has happened, I've realized that I was so afraid of the world. I've always feared monsters that exist in my imagination, and the only person I saw that could shelter me was Natalie. Little did I know that all along she was fighting against something much more scary. She needs me more than ever, and I have finally come to see that. I have realized that I have to fight for the one I care for so deeply. I believe that in the moment that Natalie gave the sisters control over her body, they became vulnerable. Somehow, they seemed to be trapped inside Natalie. Life is not going to be normal anymore, but I don't care. As long as I have Natalie, everything will be alright. It's been a week, and things are starting to normalize. Still, sometimes at night, I wake up, and when I turn to look at Natalie, I see those pitch black eyes. But I hold Natalie's hand, and in the blink of an eye, her green eyes return, brighter than ever.